Still June 22nd, 2022. My name is Larissa. This is Patent Leather Jean, my 2020 Lenten season novella, an original work of fiction by Larissa Dahroug. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. Korean Eye Job. Robin lumbered down the side aisle of the plane, looking for his seat. He had paid extra for one of the side seats with a window. He always did this when he traveled to Asia. It was worth the extra expense to only have one person next to him and be able to lean against the side of the plane and sleep. He hadn't thought of it the first time he visited the Asian continent and had taken the cheapest seat available, one in the middle of the middle section of the plane. The man to his left had pulled out a fifth of Jack from his coat pocket just after takeoff, downed it and passed out, burping and breathing sour liquor stink in Robin's face the entire 14 hours to LAX. The woman to his right had tossed and turned back and forth, leaning her head on his arm, and had the worst gas. Robin had looked on with envy at an early 20-something kid with giant earphones and a pillow, blissfully dreaming with his head against a closed window to the far right. Then, when Robin finally got up to use the restroom, the guy on the end of his row had spilled his coffee on Robin's brand new topsiders. After that, he made sure he was either against the window or, if his director approved it, first class. Robin spotted his seat ahead of him and was immediately annoyed. An old woman with what sounded like a smoker's cough was in his seat with a big quilted carry-on in the seat next to her. The carry-on looked oversized to Robin. He took a slow, deep breath as he approached the woman who was pretending to be asleep already. Robin cleared his throat. Ahem. Ma'am, Robin started. The woman didn't open her eyes, but coughed a phlegmy hack without covering her mouth. A group of Korean people, situating themselves in the center section next to him, looked over in what appeared to be fear and dug frantically through their bags, producing medical masks and placing them over their faces. Robin pulled his ticket from the pocket on the inside of his blazer and shook it as he attempted to rouse the woman again. Ma'am, he said loud and firm. Ma'am, excuse me. You were in my seat. The woman made a show of being startled, awake, and confused. Oh my, what's this? What's going on? What do you want? She looked up at Robin. Robin didn't smile. His expression remained flat as he leaned slightly forward, offering his ticket to her bagged eyes. Madam, you are in my seat. Please check your ticket and find your seat. The woman's face turned angry. Oh, just take this one. I'm already situated in my hip. She pushed her bag to the floor in front of her, shoving it under the seat, and grabbed at her left hip in an overly exaggerated fashion. Robin wasn't having it. He recognized this type of behavior from his own mother. Give his mother 40 years of cigarettes and tanning salon appointments, and you'd have the awful woman in his seat. I most certainly will not. I paid extra for that seat, and I'm going to sit in it, Robin replied. You'd make an old woman move just because you paid extra. Shame on you. If I knew your mother... Robin interrupted her before she could finish the inane sentence. I don't care if you do know my mother. I'm getting a flight attendant, Robin said. But he didn't need to, because a strong, youngish Korean woman with a smart haircut, perfectly painted lips, and tailored uniform was already almost there. What is the problem here? She addressed the old woman. This rude man wants my seat, the woman lied. Robin could feel the vein over his right temple starting to throb. He presented the flight attendant with his ticket. She took it from his hand. Excuse me, but this seat is mine. I paid extra for this seat, and she needs to move to hers, Robin calmly explained. The flight attendant looked at the ticket and at Robin and at the seat number on the overhead and finally at the old woman. Ma'am, please produce your ticket, she said professionally in perfect English. The old woman gasped and brought her hand to her throat in an overly dramatic gesture. I thought you Asians were respectful of elders. I'm not even sure where I put my ticket, she exclaimed as she began to rifle through the awful, garish, quilted monstrosity of a bag. She began removing items from the bag and placing them on the seat beside her. Robin was amazed. The flight attendant was beginning to look angry, and passengers were backing up in the aisle, muttering about the spectacle unfolding. Robin could feel sweat starting to run down his back and bead on his lip. The flight attendant spoke next. "We Asians respect hard work and honesty. Place your items back in your bag and come with me." The flight attendant started to motion to two other attendants at either end of the plane, who were now starting to move people to either side to make way for Robin's attendant and the old woman to move. Panic registered on the old woman's face as she realized her power play had failed miserably. She stammered as she stuffed used tissues, a crossword puzzle book, and a pack of Benson and Hedges back into her bag. "Wait! I know where my ticket is." She grabbed at her back pants pocket and produced the ticket. The flight attendant's eyes got wide as she pressed her lips together and flared her nostrils at the old woman in silent reprimand, snatching the ticket from her shaking hand. "Ma'am, your seat is in the center section on the other side of the plane. What made you think you could sit in this seat? If you move quickly and quietly, I will not summon the authorities." The flight attendant handed the woman her ticket and stood over her with her hands on her hips as the old woman whimpered and scrambled, gathering her things. Robin moved back, as did the attendant, and the woman moved awkwardly out of the seat and down the aisle. Some of the other passengers clapped as the flight attendant followed the woman down the aisle, directing her around the back of the plane and up the other side to her seat, where she sat sheepishly while surrounding passengers stared and whispered to each other. Robin placed his carry-on in the overhead and pushed his briefcase under the seat in front of him. The other passengers that had been stuck in the aisle found their seats and settled in. After a few minutes, the flight attendant reappeared. "Sir, I apologize for the inconvenience. Can I offer you a pillow or a blanket?" she inquired. "A pillow would be wonderful." Robin exhaled heavily in relief. The flight attendant nodded and walked a few rows back, returning with a plastic-wrapped pillow and a small package with earplugs, and handed them to him. "Thank you," Robin said, bowing his head slightly in respect as he took both items gratefully. The flight attendant smiled a small kind of smile and walked away. Robin sat the pillow and the earplugs on the seat next to him and took out his phone to text Jean. "Hey babe, just got on the plane. Tell you about it when I get home. See you in about 25 hours. Can't wait. Love you." He hit send, turned the phone off, and stuffed it in his blazer pocket. The sweat that had started to run down his back now felt cold and slightly sticky against the pressure of the seat. He stuffed the plugs in his ears, unwrapped the pillow, and stuck the plastic in the pocket on the back of the seat in front of him. Situating the pillow between his ear and the closed window, he closed his eyes and waited for takeoff. He didn't even notice when a tiny waif of a person slipped into the seat next to him until the plane finally jostled back and forward, taxiing for takeoff. Robin opened his eyes and sat up. The pillow slid down between his shoulder and the wall of the plane. A woman in the seat next to him looked at him unembarrassed and smiled, revealing slightly crooked front teeth behind full heart-shaped lips. Robin smiled slightly and nodded, noticing the young woman's eyes. He couldn't know for sure without asking rude questions, but it looked as if she had probably had her eyes done. It was a common cosmetic procedure Korean women went through that he had learned about on his first trip to the country. The company liaison, who had met him at the airport, had mentioned it casually in the car ride from the airport to the hotel. He had joked about how he had just gotten a package deal for his wife and 2 daughters. He had laughed as he explained they would be going out for dinner because his wife didn't want anyone coming to the house while they were all recovering. June laughed, calling his 3 puffy-eyed girls his 3 blind mice. Robin had been taken aback by not only the procedure, whose aim was to make Asian eyes appear more Western, but also by the flippant way June described the matter. Jean would never consider such a procedure. Such things, to her, were a vanity not worth the expense, and even if she did, Robin would never discuss such an intimacy with a stranger. When he told Jean about it when he got home, she had been fascinated by the cultural differences, as well as impressed that June knew enough about Western nursery rhymes to make the 3 blind mice joke. Robin had felt a little embarrassed that he hadn't noticed that. It was something he admired and sometimes envied about Jean, her ability to notice details like that about people and culture. Sometimes he wished she could go on business trips or to meetings with him to notice such nuances. On more than one occasion, she had been able to sort out misunderstandings between Robin or his American colleagues and colleagues or clients from overseas because of her innate cultural sensitivity. He was looking forward to being home and running a couple interactions past her. All this was running through his mind as the plane taxied and the woman next to him was looking at him. Robin spaced out a little and continued to stare at her without seeing her. He was shaken out of it when the nose of the plane picked up off the ground and the young woman giggled softly. Robin blinked his eyes and nodded in apology as he turned back toward the window and pillow. "It's okay," the woman said. "What?" Robin looked back at her confused. He wasn't embarrassed. "It's okay. Lots of men like to look at me," she explained. Robin was a little offended. He hadn't actually been looking at her, but through her. He replied curtly, "I'm sure they do, but I wasn't really looking at you. I'm just tired." "Oh, okay. I see you have a ring. Don't worry. I won't tell her." She giggled. Robin didn't know which was going to be more annoying, the old woman or this stupid woman-child. He smiled a sarcastic smile with half his mouth and turned back to his pillow. The woman reached out with a thin, barely there hand and touched his shoulder. "I'm going to America to be rich and famous. Maybe you'd like to know me." She leaned forward and whispered at him. Now Robin was offended. He was pretty sure this was a sexual proposition. He had experienced this in a rough neighborhood in Seoul when he had gotten lost one time, but it surprised him to encounter it on the plane. He sat up straight and alert and looked directly at the young woman. He saw she was very young now. The makeup, silk blouse, and knockoff pumps made her appear grown up at first glance, but take those things away, and she might be one of Ricky and Jimmy's classmates. He was now both insulted by and concerned for this young person next to him. While thinking of what he wanted to say to or ask this girl, he looked over her shoulder to see where the flight attendant was and caught sight of the old woman. She was staring directly at him attentively, watching the interaction. Robin narrowed his eyes at her as he began to put together the situation. The old woman slowly shook her head back and forth in a no expression at him. Robin sat back, but kept his face slightly turned toward the girl as he spoke softly but firmly. "Look, I can see you are young," he began. "I'm 21, more than old enough," she said. "I don't believe that for a minute, but even if you are, I'm not interested. If you need help, we can call the flight attendant. Are you traveling alone?" Robin asked. "I'm 21, the girl repeated. "I'm more than old enough. I'm going to Hollywood. Going to be rich and famous. It's none of your business who I travel with. Never mind. Go to sleep, fatty. I only like strong, handsome men. Not like you." Robin let out a small, exasperated breath and furrowed his brow at her. While it was true he didn't have six-pack abs, he also wasn't anything near fat, just soft and middle-aged. Certainly stronger than most of the guys he worked with, even the younger ones. He played racquetball once or twice a week at the club when he was home. Gene took a yoga class at the same time as his play slot. He played with Corey, the yoga instructor, Tracy's husband. They'd been playing together for 5 years now. He started to open his mouth to say something in reply, but decided it wasn't worth the trouble this little girl could start for him. Instead, he turned his face back toward the pillow and closed his eyes. He probably wasn't going to go to sleep, though. Now he was worried about the wallet and phone in his pocket. She was probably an adept thief as well. If anything else strange happened before the plane landed, he would alert the flight attendant. The girl got up to use the bathroom 3 times in the duration of the flight. In between, she seemed to drift in and out of consciousness. The last time she returned from the restroom, she was sniffling, and Robin thought he saw a faint powdery trace around her nose and cheek, but she used the back of her hand to wipe her face, and it was gone. He couldn't be sure he saw anything. He did notice she became quite alert, however, and fidgety. But he reasoned with himself that she might just be excited for her trip to America. He, too, had been a little fidgety nearing the flight's descent his first time visiting Korea, and he was a grown man. Still, something about the whole interaction didn't seem right. He had spent most of the flight so far with his eyes closed, pretending to sleep, but the whole time his senses were on edge, waiting for something to happen. It was awful. The flight attendant came around again with the beverage cart. This time, Robin sat up and accepted a cup of burnt-tasting coffee. The girl had one as well. As the flight attendant handed the steaming cup to Robin, she asked, "Is everything all right, sir?" Robin was surprised. Did he look that uncomfortable, or had the flight attendant seen something too? They locked eyes for a moment, and then he gave a half smile looking at the girl who was blowing on her cup of coffee and shrugged slightly. The flight attendant's eyes widened and nodded ever so slightly, as if Robin's gesture confirmed something for her. Then she pushed the cart to the front of the aisle without serving the last few rows. She picked up the phone receiver from the nearest attendant station and spoke quietly in Korean to someone on the other end, then returned to finish the beverage service. Robin sipped his coffee and opened the window for the first time the entire flight. He could just make out the shores of Hawaii on the horizon. The girl lurched across Robin's lap excitedly, almost spilling both her and his coffee all over him as she squealed, "Is that America?" Now Robin was sure that she was either high or just a child. No grown woman with her senses about her that he knew behaved that way. "Yes," he replied matter-of-factly while pushing her out of his lap. "That's Hawaii." "Hawaii!" the girl squirreled with delight. Just then the pilot came over the loudspeaker announcing that they were 20 minutes ahead of schedule and had approximately 5.5 hours left in the flight. The girl slumped back into her seat with a pout. "It's so long," she complained. Robin pretended he hadn't heard her and decided to finish the flight watching in-flight TV. He pulled his briefcase out from under the seat and fished out his in-flight headset and plugged it in. The girl produced an emery board and filed her nails. After an almost unwatchable Wayans Brother movie, an hour of ESPN, and a couple reruns of crappy sitcoms, the TV shut off and the pilot came back on the loudspeaker. The girl had been asleep, and the sudden blast of the pilot's voice startled her awake. She grabbed both armrests to steady herself and inadvertently touched Robin's wedding ring. He pulled his hand away in recoil, and she giggled. The pilot announced that they were about to begin their descent to LAX. He made some additional announcement about connecting flights, the weather, and the local time before he asked everyone to return their tray tables and seats to their original upright position and thanked everyone for flying Korean Air. The flight attendant came around one last time to pick up any trash. She nodded furtively to Robin as he handed her an empty cup and the plastic wrappers from his pillow and earplugs. As they taxied the runway, Robin turned his phone on and texted Jean, "Just landed at LAX, 45-minute layover until the connecting flight to San Jose. See you in a few hours. Love you." He waited for her to text back her usual "can't wait, love you too," but it never came. He was a little worried. The girl next to him took out a phone and read a text she received but did not reply or send a text out. Instead, she looked over her shoulder in the direction of the old woman, who had her nose buried in her phone attentively. As the plane stopped and the door was opened, everyone stood up in triumph. The girl pulled a smallish purse out from under the seat and pressed herself into the aisle of eager passengers. Robin slung the strap of his briefcase over his shoulder and squeezed into the aisle to get his carry-on. The girl was already at the door of the plane. It was as if she had squeezed between everyone with her tiny size. Robin looked back but didn't see the old woman anywhere as he filed off the plane with everyone else. His eyes were happily adjusting to all the signs in the terminal in English, and then he saw it. Passing the duty-free and heading towards customs, he saw the girl and the old woman. The old woman had made it past the customs agent already and was on the other side, digging through that horrid bag. Ahead of him, 3 police officers and 2 men in dress slacks and shirts carrying firearms were approaching the girl from 3 different angles. An officer in uniform approached her first. The girl stopped and attempted to run to a nearby ladies' room, but the 2 men in dress slacks cut her off and stopped her. She crumpled to the floor and began to sob. Robin saw the flight attendant speaking to another woman in some type of law enforcement uniform at the desk, and the old woman looking on with deer-in-the-headlight eyes. Then he saw the old woman turn and disappear into the crowd. A group of people gathered around the girl and the officers to watch the drama unfold. Robin tucked his crumpled ticket from the flight into his back pants pocket, decided he wasn't interested, and just wanted to get to his terminal and maybe grab a sandwich. He was pretty sure there was a deli counter-style place in the terminal he was headed to. He was hungry since he pretended to sleep through the meal service on the flight. That stuff was usually the worst anyway. Robin hated LAX. Once he made it through customs, he had to exit the building and either run like hell or grab a quick shuttle to another building where the terminal for his flight to San Jose was located. He was lucky this time, and a shuttle was just arriving as he stepped out and onto the sidewalk. As he stepped up onto the shuttle, he felt someone bump into him from behind. He turned around to see the old woman from the earlier flight. She muttered something at him that he didn't quite catch, but sounded something like, "Hope you're happy with yourself." He looked at her with disgust, saying, "Excuse me?" The woman smiled sarcastically and answered, "Pardon me, watch your step." Robin shook his head and turned to situate himself with his bags on the shuttle. He sat near the front, and the old woman sat in the back. He purposely didn't look at her, though he could feel her staring a hole in his face the entire short ride across the airport campus. Somehow, she got off the shuttle ahead of him. As he exited the vehicle, he saw her getting into a shiny new white Mercedes with two very well-dressed men. One was behind the wheel, the other was putting her bag in the trunk of the car. As she sat in the front passenger seat, Robin could see the old woman and the driver having an animated conversation. As Robin passed the car to enter the other terminal, the driver turned his head sharply and looked at him. He was wearing sunglasses, so Robin couldn't see his eyes, but he knew he was looking at him. The old woman was too, while still talking to the driver. The driver's face followed Robin, nodding a yes gesture as he slipped in the door of the building and out of the old woman and driver's view. Robin thought to himself, "Crazy LA trash," and headed for the sandwich stand. He had 20 minutes until his flight to San Jose boarded, and he was starving. A woman was announcing his boarding group as Robin approached the gate, roast beef sandwich and sparkling water in hand. As he got to the ticket attendant, he shoved his hand in his back pocket, mistakenly looking for his old ticket instead of the fresh new ticket in his interior blazer pocket. For a second he panicked when he found no ticket. Then he remembered the fresh ticket was in his blazer and promptly presented it to the attendant, who looked at him impatiently. Her face was pulled so tight you could almost see her teeth through the skin above her lip. She was trying to look 20, but her hands told a different story. She was at least 50, if not older. Robin smiled plaintively at her and sauntered on his way. This flight wasn't quite full, and the plane was so much smaller. 2 seats on the left and 3 seats on the right, 1 aisle and 1 restroom. Robin found his seat and stowed his bags, tucking his used ticket in his back pocket, as was his custom, to keep used and unused tickets separate and unconfused. It struck him that the other ticket was missing. Did the old woman take it? What on earth would she want his old ticket for? He shrugged the thought off as he sat down, unwrapped his sandwich, and stuffed the first bite in his face. The ticket probably just fell out when she bumped into him. It didn't matter anyway. He had no reason to think he'd ever see her again. It was going to be a great story to tell at the office, and he was almost home. He had an hour and a half to San Jose, then 4.5 hours to Detroit. After that, it was just about an hour's drive to Troy, as long as rush hour traffic wasn't too heavy. It wasn't usually heavy this time of year, and he only had carry-on this time, so he didn't need to wait at the baggage claim. He might even beat the 4:30 rush and make it home faster than expected. Taxiing at San Jose, he pulled out his phone to check if Jean had texted him back yet. She hadn't. He considered calling, but he wasn't sure where the gate for the DET flight was, and he only had 20 minutes between flights. Walking toward the flight monitors, he took the last slug of the sparkling water and tossed the bottle in the recycling. He was relieved to see his gate was just a few yards away and headed in that direction, just in time to board. A young Filipino man was the ticket attendant and smiled at him. Robin nodded and boarded the full flight. What appeared to be a girls' water polo team was already on the plane and singing some silly team song. Travel was never a dull moment. He found his seat and shoved the earplugs from the Korean flight in his ears and nodded off. Once the flight was in the air, the girls settled down and talked quietly or watched in-flight TV. Robin didn't open his eyes until the flight touched down in Detroit. The man seated next to him was about the same age and probably in a similar business. Glancing at him, he was nearly a mirror image of Robin. Mid-40s, blazer, no wrinkle slacks, Oxford, sensible shoes, leather briefcase, and a shoulder strap, and black carry-on. He glanced back at Robin and nodded in telepathic agreement. Silently, the two men slid off the plane into their long-term parked vehicles. Robin tossed his bag in the back of the Grand Cherokee and hopped in the driver's seat. The vehicle had been parked in the sun, and he could smell the warm, sweet, lingering scent of Jean's perfume. Before pulling out of the lot, Robin checked his phone once again to see if Jean had replied. She hadn't. He was worried. He also saw for the umpteenth time the nearly 20 calls from his mother over the past 2 weeks and 3 unlistened to messages. He decided to listen to the messages before attempting to call Jean. He suspected Jean's non-response and his mother's plethora of communication were probably related. Robin hated his mother, but he was careful not to let on to Jean this was the case. He knew if Jean knew he hated his mother more than she did, that Jean would complain to him twice as much out of interpreted camaraderie, and he wasn't interested in that either. Jean gained satisfaction and felt better after a Joan-inspired rant, while such expressions just made him hate himself. He tried to explain it to her once a couple of years ago after a debacle at his 40th birthday celebration. Joan had been in rare form. She and her toady, Gertrude Donovan, got smashed and taunted Jean that she better use her eggs before they all scrambled. Robin called a cab and made the 2 women leave immediately. Once they were gone, Telly and Sonia, Robin and Jean's best couple friends, had felt awkward and left the restaurant. Jean had cried inconsolably in public. They hadn't been back to Ernie's since, and it had been their favorite date night spot until that point. Still, given all of Jean's sensitivity and empathy for everyone and everything else, he couldn't understand why he had to explain this to her about himself. To her credit, after he told her that night that talking about his mom made him feel bad about himself, Jean had cut way back on how much she complained about Joan, but it had come at a cost. She also stopped sharing a lot of other stuff he used to enjoy talking about too, like her work and what she did while he was away on travel. Their conversations over the past couple of years had become increasingly one-sided, with him doing most of the talking. Jean rarely offered much about herself anymore, and this latest thing with the camera was ridiculous to him. Why was she letting some neighborhood kids get the best of her was beyond him. So they knocked on the door, so what? Just because the phone rings doesn't mean you have to answer it, right? Why was this any different? He punched the passcode in for his voicemail and listened to the first message. "Robbie, honey, it's Mama. Call me back, please." Robin deleted the message. He knew his mother was up to something when she called herself Mama. Then he listened to the second message. "Robbie, sweetie, it's Mama. I really need to talk to you. I'm so worried about Jeannie. Mrs. Donovan keeps calling me, telling me she's running around the yard in her bathrobe, talking to herself. You should get her to see Dr. Shelton, you know, the wonderful psychiatrist who runs that widow support group I went to. His number's 248-375-2121. I already called him. He's accepting patients. He's expecting your call. Now call me. I need to know you are okay. Love you, sweetie. Bye." Robin saved this one as he shook his head in disbelief. There was no way he believed that Jean was out in the yard in her robe talking to herself. Nor were they going to call any psychiatrist. Why his mother and her friend were so cruel to Jean, he didn't understand. He knew how much Jean hated being called Jeannie, especially by his mother. "Okay, Joan," Robin said out loud. "What's this last one?" And he heard the third message. "Robbie, it's me, Mama. Call me immediately. Mrs. Donovan said there are police and medics at your house with Jeannie. I told you that poor girl isn't right. You never should have married her. She made your father so sick. She's going to do the same to you and herself. Please call me and let me know that she hasn't hurt you. Love you, sweetie. Call me, bye." Now Robin was alarmed. Was Jean hurt? Was that why she wasn't returning his text? He found himself wishing he had installed the camera viewing app to his phone before he had left instead of poo-pooing Jean. He saved the last message from his mother, then dialed Jean's cell phone. It rang 3 times before she picked up. He could tell she had been crying. "Hello?" Jean answered flatly. "Babe, it's me. I just got in my car and I'm getting ready to head to the house. What's going on? What's wrong? Are you okay?" He knew better than to mention his mother. "I'm fine. I'll tell you about it when you get here. You'll see. Just come home." Jean sounded defeated and small, not the Jean Robin knew and loved. He was scared, and the fact that he felt scared scared him even more. "Okay, sweetheart, I'm on my way. Do you want me to pick up anything for dinner?" he offered. "I don't care. Whatever you want. I'm not hungry. Maybe a bottle of wine or something harder. Maybe vodka." Now Robin knew it was serious. Jean only drank vodka when they went out and could get fancy cocktails. "It's okay, love. I'll be there soon. Love you," he cooed. "Love you too. Bye." And Jean hung up before Robin could say anything back. Chapter 3. Old Dykes Pointing Fingers. The mid-afternoon sun fell through the sliding glass door in Joan's kitchen as she sat at the table, opening her mail. She lit a cigarette and let it balance between her lips while she picked at her cuticle, grabbed a loose emery board, and filed a jagged edge off the thumbnail she was using to slice open envelopes. There was at least 2 weeks of mail splayed across the tabletop. The smoke curled around her face and burned her eyes, making it hard to see. Joan smoked intermittently throughout her life, mostly when she was worried, or more accurately, when she was making worry in her son's life. Robin didn't know about his mother's periodic habit. She'd made a big show of quitting when Frank died, and as far as Robin knew, she hadn't had another cancer stick since. It was a soapbox she regularly climbed on when they were together in public and saw someone smoking. She'd say something like, "Look at that selfish fool, killing themselves and everyone around them. Don't they know we all need to breathe?" Robin would agree and praise her for having had the good sense and willpower to quit. Joan would soak up Robin's praise like a sponge. Sitting alone in her home now, she coughed, and the lit cigarette fell from her lips onto a pile of open junk mail sitting in front of her. As she coughed, the fluffy pile of torn envelopes and credit card offers began to smolder a bit. She grabbed her glass and tossed the remaining contents onto the small fire, forgetting just how strong Bacardi 151 is. The tiny smolder that could have been put out with the palm of her hand shot up in flames and started a much larger problem. Joan jumped up from the table in a panic, then saw the extinguisher Robin had mounted to the wall next to the gas stove for her. Joan pulled the lever and drenched the entire table with white foam. She dropped the extinguisher and fell forward, hands on her knees, panting, adrenaline shooting through her body. As she stood up, catching her breath, she saw the half-empty bottle of Bacardi on the counter and grabbed it. She removed the top and took a long swig straight from the bottle, then lit a fresh Virginia Slim. The kitchen was a mess. In addition to the fresh mess on the table, there was a pile of dishes overflowing from the sink and bags of garbage stacked against the center island that needed to be taken out. Her housekeeper, Doris, had quit 6 weeks earlier. Joan told Gertrude it was because Doris's mother was ill in the Philippines and she was going back to care for her, but that was a lie and Gertrude knew it. Gertrude ran into Doris at the market one day, and Doris had told her why she quit. She said she quit because Joan was a mean drunk. She said Joan had insisted she only had a drink when there was something to celebrate, and Doris told her something about her whole life being one big party then, and walked out the front door, leaving her key in the bowl on the side table. Gertrude had laughed. Joan didn't know this, and neither Gertrude or Doris had any intention of telling her. Robin didn't know Doris had quit. The last time he visited his mother, he had taken out the trash, wiped down the kitchen, and put dishes in the dishwasher. Joan had told Robin Doris was on vacation. He hadn't asked any more questions after that, and now she couldn't get a hold of him. She just knew that bitch wife of his had something to do with it. She had probably poisoned him or something. It would be just like one of her kind to do that. She had to get rid of the girl. She had to get that girl out of their life somehow. She just knew, if it weren't for Jean, that Robin would be there taking care of her, Joan. It was driving her mad. Joan opened the pantry to get a big trash bag to clean up the mess on the table. She had to get that taken care of as soon as possible in case Robin happened to stop by. She couldn't let him see that. He'd have too many questions. She opened the door, stepped in the closet, and tugged the pulley to turn on the ceiling light. The bulb flashed and popped. "Damn it anyway," Joan barked, cigarette in hand. She absent-mindedly ashed on the floor. Under the sink, she found the flashlight Robin had left the last time he had unclogged the sink for her. Back in the pantry, she scanned the shelves for the trash bags, not the kitchen size, but the thick black liner she used for the big can in the garage. The beam of light hit the case of Bacardi. She opened the flap and counted how many bottles she had left. When she heard the company was no longer going to make the 151, she had purchased 3 cases of 24 bottles. The first case she gave away as Christmas gifts. A couple bottles she let them pour at the bar at Frank's funeral and Robin's wedding. She was now down to how many bottles? She ran her finger across the tops of the remaining bottles. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, plus the open bottle on the counter. She was going to have to start being more careful with this stuff. No more sharing. She didn't have much left, and she didn't think she was going to be able to find any more. On the shelf above the box of Bacardi, she found the box of thick trash liners. She grabbed the box with her cigarette hand, turned off the flashlight, and returned it to its place under the sink. Her cigarette was now down to the filter. She sucked in one last puff off it and dropped it into the sink of dirty dishes. It made a small hiss as it hit some old coffee in the bottom of a 3-day-old coffee cup. Standing next to the table, she spread open a bag, holding one point against the table with her hip and the other with her right hand. Then with her left arm, she swept the entire contents of the table into the bag. The arm of her pink Oxford was smeared with half-dissolved ink from glossy mailers that hadn't burned but were still saturated in the fire-stop foam, greasy ash, and some salsa from a paper plate she had forgotten was on the table as well. She slipped the blouse off and shoved it in the bag as well. The table was smeared-looking and needed wiped, but in all, things weren't that bad. There was just one small spot directly under where the blaze had flared that looked burned, and it really was a very small spot. A placemat would cover it easily, and if Robin saw it, she'd tell him it was from the bottom of a hot pot or some such thing. Not a big deal. She knew there'd been a couple bills in the mail that she hadn't opened yet, but nothing was overdue. Whatever they were, they would send her a first notice once they came up overdue. She always paid her bills. Being late on one or two this time wasn't going to hurt anything. Besides, if it did, she would just call and play the helpless old widow card. It always worked. People were so easily persuaded when she let them know how hard her life was, being a widow and having such a sick daughter-in-law causing strife. Joan slipped her feet into an old pair of Frank's sandals, and she still kept by his chair, and took the bag of burnt evidence out to the dumpster in the parking lot behind her condo. Ed Corbett was out letting his dog take a crap. For some reason, he kept asking Joan out on a date. She had told him no 5 times already, but he just kept asking. She tried to tiptoe, but was a little tipsy from the 151, and Frank's sandals were far too big on her feet. She stumbled and yelped when she hit her head on the corner of the painted concrete wall, masking the dumpster from overt view. Ed noticed and started in her direction, dragging the pooping pooch along by his leash. Joan tossed the bag into the dumpster, then slipped off the sandals and headed back towards the condo as fast as she could, but she wasn't fast enough. Ed cut her off just in front of her back patio. She could see the sliding glass door into the kitchen just over his shoulder. Ed was standing in front of her with a big, goofy grin. His mutt dog was cowering at his feet with its tail between its legs. Joan hated the animal, and the dog wasn't fond of her either. "Hey there, Joni girl," Ed said. "My name is Joan, or Mrs. Randall, Ed," Joan replied. "Why, Widow Randall, how are you today, ma'am?" Ed mocked with a chuckle. "Ed, I'm not in the mood. Please let me by." "You shall not pass," Ed chided, mimicking the Gandalf character from that stupid movie Robin and Jean forced Joan to go see with them that one Christmas. "I mean it, Ed. I am not in the mood." Joan shifted her weight to one side and placed her fist on her hip, cocking her head the other direction, trying to look serious and tough. In her other hand, she had her late husband's shoes. "Oh, Joni, you are too much. So what's a guy got to do to snag a dinner date with a hot ticket like you? I have a buy one, get one dinner coupon for Ciro's I clipped out of the bulletin this past Sunday, burning a hole in my pocket. What'd you say? You and me, tomorrow night." Ed looked so hopeful. "I say, blow it out your ass, Ed. I'm not interested. Why don't you go ask Eleanor down the block there? She's been after you since your wife left you 10 years ago now." This was mean, and Joan knew it. Eleanor was developmentally disabled and sweet on any man with a dog. She hoped Ed would finally get the message. Ed just laughed. "Oh, Joni, you're just too much. That's what I like about you. You got spirit, girl. Well, if not tomorrow, maybe some other time." He looked down at his poor pooch, who now had the leash wrapped 3 times around his ankles. "Come on, Dylan. Let's go home and find your milk bones." Ed stepped out of the loop around his ankles and tugged the leash, making the dog follow. "And make sure to pick up your dog's shit, you old fart," Joan called after him. Ed just laughed and stepped over a turd. Joan rushed across her patio and through the sliding door. Once back in her kitchen, she scanned the room, deciding what needed to be done next. On the handle of the oven, she grabbed a stained tea towel that said in faded letters, "Anything goes at Grandma's house." It had been a gift from the twins a few years ago. She dampened it under the faucet and wiped the remaining grime and residue off the table. Then she rinsed and wrung it out and tossed it down the stairs to the basement where her laundry room was located. The rag landed on a pile of laundry that had been accumulating for the past 6 weeks. She would have to do a load soon or go buy some new underwear and towels at Target. Maybe Gert would want to make a trip. She always needed litter and fancy feast for her beasts. Plus, that would give her a reason to swing by Robin's house and see for herself what was going on over there. It was only 2 p.m. He would be home from work around 6 if he was in the office. The last message she had left Robbie had been that morning after Gert had called to tell her about the cop and the medic and Jean in her bathrobe. So far, things were going as planned. And no one was any the wiser. Even Robin had confided in her like he used to. The last time he stopped by, he mentioned something about Jean putting up a camera and how he didn't feel comfortable with it on the house. He said he felt like Jean was being, what was the word he had used? Unreasonable? Unrealistic? Unsomething. Whatever it was, he had said it had been music to Joan's ears. Stomping up the stairs to get her purse and a fresh blouse to put over her sleeveless t-shirt, Joan caught sight of herself in the mirror. Pardon me. Everything's fine. Just you be quiet. Rowdy. Let's start this paragraph over again. Stomping up the stairs to get her purse and a fresh blouse to put over her sleeveless t-shirt, Joan caught sight of herself in the mirror. Ugh, her hair was a mess, and her eye makeup was smeared from the smoke in her eyes. She decided to take a quick shower and freshen up entirely. She didn't want Gert or Robin or Jean smelling cigarettes on her, especially since she had read Jean the Riot Act this past New Year's Eve when she caught her having a puff with one of her scumbag college friends. She just knew those two were sleeping together behind Robin's back. She had said something to Robin a few days later, but he had told her to mind her business, that Jeremy was just a friend, and besides, he was gay. Joan told Gert she thought her poor boy was under some spell, that Jean and her type were all witches, and that Jeremy was far too macho-looking to be a gay. Gert had nodded in agreement. Joan decided to ring Gert and let her know she was on her way over. The phone only rang once. "Hello?" Gertrude answered. "Gert, it's me, Joan." "Oh, hi, Joan. I was just going to call you. Are you going to book club tomorrow?" Joan had forgotten about book club. The book was right there on her nightstand, but she hadn't read the chapter for this week. Maybe she'd do that tonight or tomorrow morning. "Oh, I don't know, maybe. I haven't read the chapter yet. But hey, I wanted to ask you something." "What's that?" Gertrude asked, as if she'd been expecting an inquiry. "You need litter or fancy feast? I was going to head over to Target and pick up a couple things. As a matter of fact, I do need some litter," Gertrude said conspiratorially. "And maybe you can check on that boy of yours?" "Exactly," Joan proclaimed. "I just need to jump in the shower real quick. I've been cleaning up over here and need to get the stink off before I go out and anyone sees me. See you in about an hour or so." "Sounds good. I'll be here," Gertrude replied. "Okie dokie, bye." Bye. Joan cradled the receiver, stripped down, and got in the shower. She scrubbed her hair twice just to be sure the cigarette smell was all gone. Once she dressed, she brushed her teeth and smeared on some eyeliner and mascara and a purplish lipstick Jean had given her for Christmas. She decided to put on a short-sleeved t-shirt weight maxi dress because it was one of the first things in her closet. Plus, Gertrude was usually wearing some kind of hippie dress, and they could be matchy-matchy like schoolgirls. Gertrude and Joan had hit it off immediately at Dr. Shelton's Widows 101 group. Both had a caustic sense of humor and a mean streak. Both women enjoyed a drink when they met, but they had learned how to drink together. Drinking, gossiping, and meddling were their favorite things to do. Well, those things and book club. Joan tolerated Gertrude's cats, and Gertrude tolerated Joan's sons. They were the best of friends, and right now they were working really hard at getting poor Jeannie the help she so desperately needs. Or so they said. Truth was, there was absolutely nothing wrong with Jean. Jean was a very good person. Joan was just terribly jealous of Jean. Jean had everything Joan wanted. Jean was talented, well-liked by her friends and colleagues, kind and smart. She also had a clean, tidy home, and most of all, the thing that bothered Joan, Jean had Robin. Of course, Joan had her older son, Tim, as well, but Tim had moved to Australia to be closer to Melanie's family when they had gotten married, then decided to stay there after the divorce to be close to his children. Joan and Gertrude had made a trip to visit one year. Robin turned 40. But Tim had told her to never come back. The two women had behaved horribly and hadn't even brought a gift for the twins, who had, up until that point, never even met their grandmother. It irritated Joan every time Jean mentioned anything about sending something to the twins for their birthday or Christmas. Joan never bothered to send so much as a card. She was the grandma. She felt it was the twins' place to call her. They never sent her a birthday card either, she had told Robin the one time he said something. Before walking out the door to her Kia, Joan cupped her hand in front of her face to check her breath. She wanted to make sure you couldn't smell the Bacardi or the cigarettes. She didn't think so, but just to be sure, she'd go through McDonald's drive-thru at the end of the block and get a cup of coffee on her way to pick up Gertrude. Coffee covers everything. Then she remembered something. Dylan. That dog was good for one thing and one thing only. Shit. She dug a plastic bag out of the trunk of her car and ran around back to collect Ed's dog's poop. Until recently, it had annoyed Joan that Ed never picked up after his animal, but then she had found a use for the turds. Wrapping the bag inside out around her hand, she collected the feces, sealed the bag, and tossed it in a box in her trunk. Then she looked over both shoulders to see if there was anyone watching her, and she hopped in the car. It was 3:15 when she pulled out of the McDonald's parking lot with her coffee. She was running a little longer than she told Gert, but Gert would wait. She always did. Besides, it was only a couple miles away, and what else was Gert going to do? Nothing. That's what. When Joan pulled into Gertrude's driveway, she was careful to pull all the way to the back, out of sight of Robin's house. She didn't want them to see her car and know she was around until she was ready to knock on the door. She parked the car in front of the detached garage in Gertrude's backyard. She could see the old Cadillac parked through the garage windows. It had been Felix's car. Gertrude hadn't driven in years. The last time she had tried to take it for a spin, she smashed the right headlight trying to get it out. Instead, Gertrude called a cab, or Joan drove her wherever she wanted to go. The two women had considered being roommates, but Joan couldn't stand the cats. Besides, having her own place had grown on Joan. She could do whatever she wanted without anyone knowing, like smoke or watch Orange is the New Black and jerk off if she wanted to. Joan got out of the car and knocked on Gertrude's back door. Gert called from the front room, "It's open." Joan opened the door and stepped over a pile of cat litter the cats had dug out of the litter boxes just inside. She didn't know how Gertrude lived with that. Joan walked through the kitchen and dining room to the front sitting room, where she found Gertrude peeking through the drapes up at Jean's house. "What do you see?" Joan asked. "Nothing right now. She just went out and got the mail a few minutes ago," Gertrude replied excitedly. "I don't think Robin is ignoring you. I think he's out of town. I haven't seen the car in days," Gertrude finished as she pulled her face from between the dusty drapes and turned to greet her friend and partner in crime. "Did you bring any more with you?" she asked Joan expectantly. "Oh, yeah, I forgot. I saw Ed and his idiot dog earlier. I have a fresh deposit in a baggie in the trunk. I'll sit it by the back door before we leave. You know that old dipstick asked me out to dinner again? Said he had a coupon for Ciro's, like that would sweeten the pot or something." Joan shook her head in disbelief, and Gertrude laughed. "Are you kidding? What an old fool. What'd you say?" "I told him to blow it out his ass and ask the retard down the street instead." The two women cackled. Then Gertrude stepped into Joan and kissed her on the cheek. Joan looked her in the eyes and asked, "So you ready to go?" Gertrude took her friend's hands and rubbed the interior of her palm. Joan kissed her back. "Get your purse, you old dyke, and let's go," Joan told her. "Okay, I just need to pee first." "Okay, but hurry up." Gertrude disappeared up the stairs for a couple of minutes, then Joan heard the toilet flush and the sink run. Gertrude reappeared, drying her hands on the front of her muumuu. "I wish you wouldn't do that," Joan said as she looked at the two damp spots on the front of her friend's dress. "What?" "That," Joan replied, nodding toward Gertrude's dress with her chin. "You have two big damp spots. People are going to think you're incontinent." "Oh, who gives a shit? If anyone says anything to me, I'll just go pee on them." "Stop it. Now let's go." Joan picked up Gertrude's purse from a nearby chair and handed it to her. The two women stepped out the back door towards the car. As Gertrude locked the door behind them, Joan got the bag of dog poop out of the trunk and sat it on top of a covered bucket that was next to the steps leading up to the back door. "Is Connor going to stop by tonight to get this?" Joan inquired, without looking up at Gertrude. "Probably not. I told him not to come by for a couple days after this morning. You should have seen it, Joan. It was beautiful. She's so upset." "You're a genius." "Yeah, well, it's only going to work if that boy Connor keeps his mouth shut. How much did you give him?" "Oh, I gave him enough." "How much is enough?" "$25 a week." Joan cut Gertrude off. "$25 a week? You think that's enough?" Joan spat as she unlocked the doors of the car, and the women climbed in. You didn't let me finish, Gertrude protested as she buckled her seatbelt. You never let me finish. Okay, sorry, go ahead, finish, Joan goaded. I am. I've been giving him $25 a week plus 3 of my methadone, Gertrude finished. But what are you taking for your back? Do you have enough to get through the week? Joan was concerned. Plenty. I've just been cutting them in half and adding more vodka to my Crystal Light. Don't worry. It's worth it to see that stupid girl lose her mind up there after all she puts you through. Joan tipped her head to the side and smiled at her good friend. Gert, I love you, you know. For the first time in my life, I actually have someone who loves me as much as I love them. And she patted Gertrude's hand as it rested on the armrest between them. Oh, shut up, you old dyke and drive. My cats are hungry, and I know you saw the litter in the mudroom when you came in. Joan put the car in reverse and backed out of the driveway. Gertrude turned on the radio and looked for WDET, All Things Considered. Came through the speakers. I think that Ari Shapiro is Jewish, but I really like him, Gertrude said. Oh, yeah? Since when do you give a shit about Jews or the news? Joan retorted. Oh, you know Felix and I used to listen to NPR all the time. Public broadcasting was the only thing he ever listened to or let me listen to. Yeah, that old fart also said lesbians were all going to burn in hell. We're not lesbians, Joan. We're bisexual. Oh, are you dating men again now? Well, no. That's what I thought. Look, I spent my whole life being what my parents wouldn't beat me for. I'm not going to go advertising things now, but I'm also not going to pretend you don't stick your tongue down my throat from time to time or play with my tits, Joan snarled. I'm still attracted to men too, Joan. You can't change that. Oh, okay, you're right. I'm sorry. Just as long as you don't go accepting any coupon dinner offers to Ciro's anytime soon, Joan laughed. Gertrude reached over and touched her hand on the wheel. I don't even like Greeks, Gertrude joked. Shut up. You love my big fat Greek wedding. Oh yeah, that's right. And I like George Stephanopoulos too. Oh, and gyros. Gertrude laughed so hard she began to cough. Hey, want to stop at the Coney after Target and have an early dinner? She managed after recovering from the laughing and coughing fit. Maybe for carry-out. I want to be back by 6 and meet Robin before he even gets in the house, Joan answered. Are you sure that's wise, Joan? Maybe give him a couple minutes. I don't think she cleaned the dog shit off her porch yet, but the railing is in the way of my view, even with the binoculars. What? Joan screamed. She left the dog shit for my Robbie to find and clean up after he's been out of town for weeks? That horrid little slut. I can't wait to see her taken away. I hope they stick her in a straitjacket. Joan, don't you think you're taking it a bit far? We're just trying to split them up, right? Gertrude furrowed her brow at Joan, who was now looking for a parking spot. Do you have your cripple placard with you? Joan asked Gertrude. Yeah, wait, I'll find it. Joan pulled into the first spot right in front of the store and let the car idle until Gertrude pulled the blue and white golden ticket out of her bag and hung it on the rearview mirror. Have you told Robin about us yet? She asked Joan as the placard swung back and forth gently. Joan pressed the parking brake and removed the keys from the ignition and turned toward Gertrude. No, my love life is none of his goddamn business. He tries to control me enough as it is. Unless he's going to leave that stupid, cheating, good-for-nothing tramp and let me move in like his father wanted, I'm not telling him anything, Joan pouted. Gertrude pursed her lips before she replied. Why don't you just move in with me? I have plenty of room, and the cats never go in the other bedrooms. You can have 2 rooms all to yourself and a bathroom, totally cat-free. Plus, you won't have to deal with Ed or his dog anymore, and think of all the gas money you'd save. Tears were welling up in Gertrude's eyes. Joan was getting mad now. Keys in hand, she pointed her index finger at Gertrude and shook it gently as she spoke. We've been through this, Gert. Do you really want to put Felix's stuff in storage? Those rooms with all that stuff still smell like him on hot days. I don't want to be in the middle of that. Besides, you wouldn't like living with me. It would ruin all the mystery. Gertrude had never even been inside Joan's condo. A couple of times she had waited in the car while Joan ran in to get something, but Joan always had a good excuse why she shouldn't come in. She was beginning to think she was hiding something. Gertrude balled her fist and pointed her finger right back at Joan. You know that's not true. You're just scared to tell everyone you're gay. You're a coward, Joan gasped. Was I a coward the time I let you kiss me in the movie theater? Was I a coward that time we held hands at the mall? Joan was livid. A tear escaped from Gertrude's eye. Now you know we were the only ones at that matinee, and holding hands doesn't count. We're old. For all anyone knew, we were helping each other from falling over. Besides, I used to hold my sister's hand all the time when we were kids. Gertrude was now crying. Kids and grown women are 2 different things. Now stop crying, you old bat, or I'm going to cry too. And with that, Joan burst into tears and threw her arms around her friend, and no one walking by even noticed. So, anyway. Oh, they're dumping wood chips outside, and what's going on with my nose? Oh, face is itching because they're dumping the wood chips outside. That's what Brody was barking at. Mm. Mm. I'd forgotten how much I like this novel.